Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. What would you do if you found out your perfect family was a total lie? That's the question at the heart of today's story. I promise you, the ending is more shocking than you can possibly imagine. Stick with me to the very end to find out what happens, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Part 1. The Golden Boy and I. The scent of gardenias and fresh-cut grass hung heavy in the warm California air. Tonight was the night of Julian's coronation. My brother, the Golden Boy, had been accepted into Stanford, and our parents, the ever-so-perfect Vances, had rented out a sprawling estate for a gala. The air hummed with the soft murmur of their friends, all here to toast my brother's brilliance. I was meant to give a toast, but my stomach was in knots. I looked at the giant projector screen behind me, a slideshow of Julian's accomplishments ready to be displayed. I pulled out my phone, my fingers brushing against the worn-out screen where my own world lived, a world of code and lines of digital art my parents couldn't comprehend. Julian stood with my mother, her hand on his back, her face beaming with pride. They hadn't even noticed my hands trembling. They never did. My perfect brother. The perfect son. A perfect lie. All of it. Tonight, the lie would come to an end. I took a deep breath and walked to the podium, the spotlight blinding me. I looked at my brother, whose smile was now frozen in a mask of panic. He didn't know I knew. He had no idea what was coming. "My name is Eleanor Vance," I began, my voice clear and steady. "And this is a story of how I found out my brother isn't who he pretends to be. 2 years earlier, I was just Eleanor. At 17, I was an afterthought, a ghost in my own home. My parents, Robert and Claire, were obsessed with conventional success. My brother, Julian, was their masterpiece. He was a year older than me, a star quarterback, and a straight A student. The house was a museum of his trophies and awards, each one a testament to his perfection. I, on the other hand, was an artist, not with a paintbrush or canvas, but with lines of code and digital pixels. My room was a sanctuary, a world of my own making, filled with glowing screens and the rhythmic clicking of my keyboard. "Eleanor, are you still doing that computer thing?" my father would ask at dinner, his voice laced with a subtle dismissal. My mother would wave her hand impatiently. "It's just a hobby, Robert, not like Julian's chess." Their words were like small, persistent cuts. They never saw the late nights I spent building algorithms or the intricate digital portraits that took me weeks to perfect. To them, my passion was a waste of time. I learned to be invisible, to bite my tongue and fade into the background. The invisibility was a curse, but it was also my greatest weapon. One Friday night, my father asked me to fix a network glitch on Julian's laptop. "He's got a big paper due, don't mess anything up." As I worked, I noticed a folder on his desktop. It was named with a generic code, Vance Cheer Project 03. Curiosity, a feeling I had learned to suppress, bubbled up. I'd never been allowed on his computer. As I opened the folder, I noticed a series of files with dates, but the file names were strange. Final Essay, Draft 2, P.S. Payment Confirmation, 500, PDF. My heart began to pound with a new kind of suspicion. I spent the next hour working through the family's network, digging into every corner of Julian's digital life. I accessed his browser history, his hidden files, and his email archives. I followed a trail of cryptocurrency transactions to a site I had never seen before, a site that offered academic assistance for high-paying clients. I found emails between Julian and a person named the Professor, a professional ghostwriter. There were spreadsheets of his entire academic career, with dates and payments for every A he'd ever received. The Golden Boy, my perfect brother, was a complete fraud. A cold, hard rage began to settle in my gut. He hadn't just been stealing the spotlight. He had been stealing his entire life. The final file in the folder was a document, a final contract. I clicked it open. The title, Emblazoned in bold font, read, Project Julian, Stanford Admissions. Essay, Final Payment Service Agreement. Part 2, A Web of Lies. The final contract sat on my screen, its bold text mocking every word my parents had ever said about Julian. My perfect genius brother was a lie. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of my lungs. I sat there for a long time, the glow of the screen illuminating a web of deception that ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. The initial shock gave way to a cold, hard resolve. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't scream. I would confront him, not out of anger, but with a chilling clarity. I found Julian in the living room, sprawled on the couch with a textbook on his lap, a smug look of effortless genius on his face. He barely glanced up as I approached. "What do you want, Ellie? I'm busy." I held his phone out to him. "I know." He sat up, a flash of annoyance in his eyes. "Know what?" "I know you're a fraud," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the silence of the room like a knife. "I know about the professor, the essays, all of it." Julian's smugness vanished, replaced by a momentary flash of fear before it hardened into a smirk. He stood up, towering over me. "And how exactly would you know that? Your little computer games? My life is real, Ellie. You live in a fantasy world. No one would believe you." He leaned in closer, his voice low and menacing. "Don't mess with me. You'll regret it." His words didn't scare me. They fueled me. He saw my hobby as a game, my quiet skills as useless. His arrogance was my greatest tool. I went back to my room, not defeated, but with a new, burning purpose. Julian's fraud was more than just a lie. It was an insult to everyone who had ever worked for something. His smug dismissal was the final push I needed. I didn't just want to prove he was a fraud. I wanted to hit him where it hurt the most. I spent the next 2 days digging deeper. My hands flew across the keyboard, a blur of motion as I navigated firewalls and encrypted files. His arrogance was a weak point. He hadn't covered his tracks nearly as well as he should have. I found an old, unsecured server he had used to store his communications with the ghostwriter. He hadn't just paid for essays, he had been paying to have entire online courses and standardized tests completed for him. His perfection was entirely manufactured, but that wasn't the worst of it. Following a trail of cryptocurrency transactions to their origin, I found something far more damning than academic fraud. Julian hadn't been paying for this with his allowance. He had been siphoning money from our parents' joint investment account. Small, untraceable withdrawals over the past 2 years, adding up to tens of thousands of dollars. He wasn't just lying about his grades, he was stealing from the very people who had put him on a pedestal. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach as I worked, my mind racing. This wasn't just about a brotherly rivalry anymore. This was a crime. I worked quickly, methodically copying every single piece of evidence, the emails, the payment confirmations, the hidden documents onto a small USB drive. I had a plan. Tonight, I would put an end to the charade. I would show them all what the ghost was truly capable of. I was just about to click the final save button when the door to my room opened. My mother, Claire, stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. Her gaze fell on my screen, which was filled with the incriminating documents. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice trembling, "what in God's name are you doing?" Part 3. Paradise Lost. My mother stood in the doorway, her face a mask of bewilderment and alarm. "Eleanor, what in God's name are you doing?" she repeated, her voice a thin, fragile wire. I didn't try to hide anything. I looked from the screen to her face, a new, unflinching strength rising within me. "I'm exposing a lie, Mom. A lie that you and Dad have spent years protecting." I gestured to the screen, where the damning evidence of Julian's fraud was laid out for her to see. Julian didn't get into Stanford. He bought his way in. He stole from you to do it. Her eyes went wide as the information on the screen finally registered. A look of utter betrayal and disbelief flickered across her face, but it was quickly replaced by rage. "How could you?" she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "This is our family. This is what you do to your own brother. To us?" My father, hearing the commotion, rushed into the room. He took one look at the screen, then at my mother's furious face, and his gaze landed on me. "Eleanor, what is the meaning of this?" "Julian's a fraud," I said, my voice steady. "He's a thief and a liar, and he's a product of this obsession with perfection. You built this gilded cage for him, and you did it at my expense." They were speechless for a moment, the facade of the perfect family finally cracking. Then the accusations began. They called me selfish, jealous, and ungrateful. They tried to guilt-trip me into silence, telling me I would ruin Julian's life and the family's reputation. I listened, my heart a cold stone. Their words, once so powerful, had lost all meaning. They were defending a lie, and I was done being a part of it. I saw the look in my father's eyes, a cold, calculating fear that told me they would do anything to stop me. "I'm leaving," I said, grabbing my phone and the USB drive. "You're not going anywhere," my father said, blocking the doorway. I pushed past him, my heart pounding in my ears. I ran out of the house, the sound of their angry shouts echoing behind me. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stop. I ran until I was exhausted, until I was just a ghost in the dark, silent streets of my perfect suburb. I had only one place to go. My uncle, Marcus, my mother's brother, lived on the outskirts of town. He had always been an outsider in our family, a quiet, observant man who valued truth over appearances. He opened the door and took one look at my tear-streaked face. Without a word, he let me in. He listened as I poured out the whole story, from the day I felt invisible to the moment I discovered the lie. He looked at me, not with judgment, but with understanding. "Your mother and father were always more concerned with the reflection than the person," he said quietly. "You did the right thing, Ellie." He drove me to the gala. As we pulled up, the sight of the glittering ballroom made my stomach clench. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Yes, I do," I replied, holding the USB drive tightly in my hand, for myself. The ballroom was a sea of flashing lights and polite applause. I stood on the stage, the small USB drive tucked in my palm. The announcer called me to the podium to deliver my speech on behalf of the family. I took the microphone and the crowd hushed. I saw my parents in the front row, their faces a mask of desperate smiles. Julian stood next to them, his posture rigid. I looked at all the faces, at the people who believed in the lie. I looked at my brother, who had mocked my passion and my worth. I looked at my parents who had traded their daughter's authenticity for their son's pretense. "Good evening," I began, my voice clear and steady. "Julian's accomplishments are well known, the perfect grades, the perfect university acceptance, the perfect life. But tonight, I'm here to talk about something else. I'm here to talk about loyalty and truth." A wave of confusion rippled through the crowd. My parents' smiles faltered. "It turns out," I continued, "that Julian's genius isn't quite what it seems." I pulled out my laptop and inserted the USB drive. The projector screen behind me, which was supposed to show a slideshow of Julian's achievements, flickered to life. The first image was a contract between Julian and a ghostwriting service. The second, a spreadsheet of every payment he had made from our parents' secret investment account. Gasps echoed through the room. Julian's face went white. My parents stared at the screen, their perfect masks shattered. The murmurs turned into a roar of disbelief. The gilded cage they had built for him and for themselves was now a public spectacle. I looked at my brother, whose eyes were filled with rage and disbelief. He had lost everything in one moment, all because he believed he was untouchable. My parents' facade crumbled. Their reputation, the very thing they valued above all else, was in ruins. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was Eleanor Vance, and I was finally free.